So Boots, tell me about your life here in Hanford and when it all began.
I came to Richland in 1948, and that was the year of the flood. And I was in high school at the time, and my parents had moved up here from Portland. And I went to school and graduated and went to work for General Electric out in 300 area in Richland.
Mm-hmm.
Worked for the metallurgy group. I had real nice group of men I worked for, and they were testing slugs, they called them, to put in the reactor with the different metals they used. And
Mm-hmm.
everything was top secret then. If we walked out of an office, we locked it. We never left anything lying on our desk.
Mm-hmm. And you went through a huge clearance process in order
The
to,
Q clearance,
to
you
get
had
that
to,
job. 'Cause
yes.
this was probably 50,
Mm-hmm.
1950, 50.
Oh, excuse me, and everything was security then, you know. The reason such tight security was because a foreign agent would come in and destroy or bomb Hanford.
Mm-hmm.
And we were making the atomic bomb during the war years, and we still had the reactors, and they were worried about a foreign agent coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that that is still going on to this day, that they treat the people who work at Hanford like that. The security is not for the person, but the person is very expendable at Hanford.
It's about the national security.
The national security is number one.
Mm-hmm. So you worked there and actually met your husband, who you had
He was in the Army at Camp Hanford, and he had just got out of college and was drafted into the Army. And the Army was stationed at Camp Hanford to, again, protect Hanford
mm-hmm.
from foreign invasion. And that's why the Army was here. And he was just young, and I was young, and I met him at a dance, and
Mm-hmm.
we fell in love and got married. But I had no intention of staying here. I did not like the area. I came from Portland, where everything is green and beautiful and
Mm-hmm.
lots of rain. And I had no intention of staying here until I met and married him.
Mm-hmm. And had your family,
Mm-hmm. Had family,
which includes
and
Winston,
stayed.
who we
Our oldest
know.
son.
Mm-hmm. And how many children do you have?
We have 6.
You have 6 children. Yeah, so you were busy then.
And we
you
have-
were going to stay here.
Yes, yes. We raised all of our kids here. They went to Richland schools. They swam in the Columbia River, which makes me very angry when I read what has gone on with the waste from Hanford.
Mm-hmm. This is due to, you had no pretense that
That
there
it was
anything
dangerous.
going
We were never
wrong.
told. Nothing ever came out about the dangerous waste that was being put into our Columbia River
Mm-hmm.
that flowed past us.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know that.
So you spent your years from the time you worked at the reservation up until just this last year, raising your family and
Being with my head in the sand,
mm-hmm.
not believing. I worked with people that worked in the area. We call it the area.
Mm-hmm.
That were scientists, and from scientists down to janitors that I know over these last 40 years. And
that's your community.
it's my community,
Mm-hmm.
and they believe it's safe out there, and I believed them.
Mm-hmm.
I believed the people I worked with. I was a realtor, and I knew people from the area that were scientists that assured us, that it was safe there, that everything was being taken care of.
So that leads us up to 1 year ago, and the explosion in which your son Winston McCulley was involved with.
And I want to go back just a little. When I worked in the 300 area, it was standard procedure to be decontaminated, we called it. If you were badly exposed, you were decontaminated. And I assumed that would always be the case, that happened regularly, that was
the solution, and
that's how they took care of our people that worked out there. Well, I no longer believe that. The explosion, those men were treated like they were expendable. They were more concerned about the publicity of it getting out to the public, and they immediately started closing down any communication about it. Nothing was in the paper about it. Nothing was on the TV. The very next morning, the doctor from Cadillac got on saying that they were fine, or he told everyone in a news release that they were fine. There was no indication that they had been exposed to anything. We tried to ask what they thought was in those tanks when they exploded. Oh, nothing. They gave two chemicals that were there in that tank. We all knew there had to be more chemicals than two in that tank because it was a sludge-filled tank. And everyone that we talked to knew that PFP was a very dangerous building, and that it had been highly contaminated over the years and covered up. I didn't know this, but I found this out later.
And how could you tell just from seeing Winston that there is definitely a larger explosion of a larger scale that happened out there that he was exposed to?
He called me. The next night when he went to work, he called me after the explosion. But the morning after the explosion, I went down to his home. And I was shocked. He was, he said, "Mom, I need to write everything down that happened. I left all my notes at work on my desk." He said, "I need to write down what's going on, but I can't make my hands work with my brain." And I knew something was really wrong. And he encouraged his wife to go off that weekend, and he was all by himself. And so I spent my weekend running back and forth and having the neighbor check on him because I was really concerned. And it didn't get better, it got worse. The symptoms, I read all I could read about chemicals. I have a friend, I got a book, I started reading about exposure to chemicals. And all the things that I read, I could recognize in my son. The night he came home, they didn't decontaminate the men. They kept him there for hours, and they took him to the hospital finally. The explosion happened at 8. They took him to the hospital around midnight. They didn't get home till around 1. And if you know anything about chemical exposure, I didn't. But if you know that it does confuse you, make you disoriented, and I feel like those men all were feeling that night. You all know what happened at the hospital. I won't go into that. But they were not, what I want to stress is they were not decontaminated. They didn't clean them up. They didn't take their clothes. They sent them home to families to re-expose our families. And to make it worse, I have a 4-year-old granddaughter, and my son crawled in bed with my daughter-in-law, my grandchild. And she's had symptoms. So it didn't stop at the hospital when they sent those men home. They sent them home to keep exposing. And it mushroomed because my son was driving our pickup that night. And I could feel, when I would get in the pickup, I felt, I've had cancer, and so my immune system is not the greatest. And so I could feel prickling and itching when I would get into the pickup. And I told my husband, and so about a month after, we took the covers off. And when I would go down to Winston's, and all he did was sleep, he would stay, he would, when they weren't interrogating him, which they did a lot of, and I call it interrogation because when he would come home from a meeting with the company, he would just flop on the couch and die. It was like, it is, yeah. I lost my train of thought.
Yeah. So upon seeing all the effects that the explosion had on your immediate family,
Yes.
Did you have was it a quick change of consciousness about what was going on
Yes.
in Hanford?
It was immediate. I was very angry. I started calling the president of the company for information. I called for MSDSs.
Which are the medical...
They're...
it's the reports that list all
the chemicals and how you are to treat an employee who has been exposed to a certain chemical. And it's a state law that everyone that could possibly come in contact with a dangerous chemical, that those MSDSs should be available to that worker. Those men had no access to those MSDSs. And we knew, or we felt, that there was a lot more than the 2 chemicals they said were in that tank were in there because of all the symptoms that all the workers were having, not just my son, but all of the workers. And so with Gay's instigation, I started calling. And I called Piper, who was the acting manager at the time of DOE, and I left a message, and the secretary got back to me and said Piper did not know what I was talking about. And he gave me Ron Gerton's number, and Ron Gerton didn't have access to him. So he referred me to Wayne Tovey, and Wayne Tovey finally, he was very consistent, and he worked for Fleur Daniel. Very good man, and worked very hard to get those MSDSs, but they were not quickly available, and they should have been right there for those men, but they weren't. So that tells me that that's not a standard working procedure for Hanford. And as I delve more, I feel like there's a lot of procedures that Hanford doesn't abide by when it comes to cleanup. And I believe that if we ever are going to clean up our world and our country of this nuclear waste, that we have to first consider the people who are involved in that cleanup And that's the everyday workers, like my son and these 8 workers. They have to be taken care of. They have to be assured that the government is going to take care of their health while they are doing this. And that should be number 1, and everything else will fall in. I believe that is the Christian way of doing business.
Is that your main focus now when you're dealing with you're still in contact with DOE and Floor Daniel?
I've kind of, it's settled down a little, but I still feel very like I have to keep at it. I have to keep talking. I have to keep learning about what's going on in our world. I have to be responsible for my little part, whatever it may be. And yes, this
Are you having a hard time doing that in the Tri-City community?
Yes, I am. People here in Tri-Cities, they're good people, and I'm a good person. I've lived here I've had my head buried in the sand all these years about what's going on at Hanford. I would like people to really be interested in what is going on at Hanford, and I don't believe they are. I believe the people who work here for a paycheck, and they do not understand what they're working in. And I believe that applies to the nuclear scientists as well. And I'll give you an example of that. I belong to an orchid society, and we were going to a meeting one night, and I was driving, we were going to Yakima, and I was talking to the lady that was with us, and I didn't know her very well, and I said, "What does your husband do?" And she says, "He's a nuclear scientist at Hanford." And I said, "Oh, what does he do?" And she says, "I don't know. I just know he works there, and I get his paycheck." And that's the mentality. When I was in real estate, that's the mentality of the wives that their husbands worked in the area. They had no idea what they did. So I believe, and that's what I would like to see, that people really become concerned about what the waste site is like. What is going on out there? How are they cleaning it up?
It sounds like the concern comes a step too late in a lot of cases, where your consciousness changed because it directly affected your family. But
Yes.
if there was more of a majority reaction to what's going on out there, then there could be less harm if they change their policies and start
I
cleaning
believe
things
so.
out
I believe if those men had been taken care of that night, if they had had an epidemiologist available, which they should have had, there isn't one. There isn't a good epidemiologist in the Tri-Cities. And of all places, this should have that
Yeah,
kind
you'd
of
have a lot
facility.
work, I bet.
If they had been taken care of, even to assured that they could go to one of their choice, and they asked to be able to do that, and the company refused. So I don't believe they were taken care of as they have stated they've been taken care of. They have not. And still haven't. It's been a year now. And they're still playing games with them.
So have you felt like there's been any support in the community? I mean, there's been quite a bit of media attention from the news nationally and locally. So I'm sure people in your circles know about what's happened.
There's been a few few friends that have supported, but mostly we don't talk about it. They don't ask how, they know Winston, they don't ask how he's doing. They don't talk about it. And at first I talked about it all the time, but now I don't talk about it either, because what is there to say?
Yeah.
People here have to work.
Yeah.
They have to live. They have to make a living. And that's what most of the people are doing, is making a living by working at Hanford. And so,
A little bit of denial.
yes, I believe there's a lot of denial here.
I was going to ask you how your son's doing now.
How's your son now? How's Winston?
Not good. I think he's probably, I don't know, probably depressed. I don't have any, I'm not a doctor. I just know that he's not the Winston that
Is he
I.
seeing doctors?
Yes, he does go for, he's going, yeah. But he's not the same person that he was. And all the men's wives will tell you the same thing, that there's, they're not themselves.
All 8.
All of them, and Darling.
No, I actually missed the beginning. Was he one of the firefighters? Or?
No, he was
Or not the super, but the foreman.
the foreman of the
The
group.
construction group.
Yeah.
Subcontracted from Floor Daniel.
He was one of the men that were,
Oh, he was working with Joe.
yeah, yeah, he was out there with Joe. I'm his mother.
Yeah.
And I got really involved in it. I just jumped in with both feet hands, fighting, and hasn't done me a lot of good. But it's been what can I say?
I think you
It's-
bottled it up. I don't think you'd be much better off.
No, I'd be a basket case if
Yeah.
I bottled it up. And I'm not saying I'm not now, but no, Gay's been wonderful to help and lead me. And I've gone to all the meetings I could go to and talk about it. So I'm not a public speaker, but I'm learning to talk.
How long did you work at Hanford?
I worked on and off. Well, we got married in 55. I graduated in 52, so that was 3 years. Then I quit. Then I went back and off and on over my marriage.
And you've lived here for
Since 1948.
50 years this year.
Yes.
Can you describe to us what it was like after a half century to suddenly be forced to reevaluate your opinion of Hanford?
I can understand. I was listening to someone of the workers just a while ago about what they had been going through. And I went, yeah, I felt that too. It's desolation. It's a feeling of being in an alien land. You're in a place that you didn't think you'd ever be in. And that you have no control over, the controlling person. But what can I do? I live here in this spot that I love. And it's a waste dump. In all these years, I thought it was safe. I thought they were doing everything that needed to be done to clean this up. That's what the Tri-City Herald told us. And I believed that. And it's really a feeling of despair when you realize what you're living. And I guess that's why I couldn't just curl up and die. I had to do something.
You're staying here.
Yeah, I said, because I like to run away. And I said to my husband, I want to move. I want to get out of here. And he says, we're not leaving. And I went, well, guess I'm going to have to get busy then. I can't just sit here and do nothing. So that's what I'm doing. I've talked, and I talk to whoever will listen to how I feel about Hanford and cleanup, and that our dollars need to be spent on cleanup and not making more tritium. Cleanup at all the sites, the nuclear sites. That's what needs to be done. And that needs to be done for your kids and your grandkids, not just for Tri-Cities. We all need to think about what we're doing to this earth.
What do you say to your obviously some of your neighbors who you probably had good rapport with, that's changed now for some of them, I would think?
My neighbors have been really good.
Have they?
Yeah, they have. Our house, our phones have been tapped. Now you can call it whatever. I don't know who did it. I'm not naming names. I have no idea who did it. But when it first happened, we were very paranoid. I was. And we went on vacation, and I had my husband board the house up, really lock it down. And the neighbors were very good to watch. I knew everybody that came while we were gone because they kept tabs, of who came. One of the neighbors' husbands works out for DOE, I found out later. But no, they've been very good about it. The people are good people here. They're not monsters. I think there are a few monsters in the top echelon somewhere. But the people here are good people. I just don't think they realize what happens to the little people like my son and these workers. I don't think they realize what has happened. They believe what the top puts out in the news, and they don't tell the truth. The truth has started to come out, and started, I think, due to Heart of America, Jerry Paulette. He's dogged their footsteps. And gay, and they're called all kinds of names because they do step out. Americans need to wake up, because those people aren't out for their gain. They're out to help us. And they've helped me a lot, and I appreciate them.
What was your college degree in?
I don't have a college degree. I went to school and graduated from high school, went to work at 300 area right out of high school.
Right out of high school, so you were 18, 19 years old.
Yeah.
And what kind of work were you doing there?
Secretarial, and I worked for a metallurgy group when I first went to work. Loved it. They were just super guys to work for. And they were right in the thick of it.
In retrospect, can you pinpoint other people throughout your life that have probably been affected health-wise?
Yeah, I can. I can't name names, but I can tell you that there has been people that have died of cancer and other diseases that I wonder now wasn't from exposure at Hanford. And I know all of Tri-City knows of a lot of the cases that were really highly public, and I can name those names because they've been in the paper. But Ard is one of them, and he goes to our church. Ardall, and he died, and was very sick, off and on through the years.
And that was because you were here during the Green Run
Yes.
experiments as well.
See, and I didn't even realize what Green Run meant, and that they were doing that. Had no idea they were doing that. I was just so shocked when I read that. And that they monitored our children. I didn't know that.
How were they monitoring?
They, our son went to Christ the King Catholic School, and I remember the radiation monitor being in the parking lot of the school. And my son Winston asked me about it. He says, "Mom, do you remember?" And I said, "Yeah." And I don't know why they were doing that.
And you never got reports from it?
And there are reports. I found out. I went to the internet, found out there are reports available now, but they are classified. I mean, it takes an attorney to get into them. But I would like to know about my children and why. Why did they test them? It's a big question in my mind. But no one else seems concerned about that. There's a lot of thyroid cancer or thyroid problems among kids my kids' ages. But no one thinks about it, the plant being involved. No one mentions that.
Many towns have large businesses, large companies that hire lots of people where bad things happen, whether it's mining or chemical plants, manufacturing plants. What would you say to someone who lives in a town like that about getting to the truth, even though the truth might be very painful? Do you somehow feel better in any way knowing more of the truth? I mean, does that give you any kind of peace at all anywhere?
No.
None. Wow.
Not at this point. And maybe that's why the people do have their head buried, because knowing doesn't help. Knowing is not helping the situation. If you could know it and be able to do something about it and go to a manager and depend on that person to intercede and correct whatever those people are being exposed to, yes, then I would feel better. But that's not happening. That is not happening at Hanford. At Hanford, it is still secrecy, just like the war years. It is not. It has not changed.
After all of the publicity and the hearings and the whistleblowers, there's still that
The
mentality.
whistleblowers are made light of in the Tri-Cities. The whistleblowers are not taken seriously. I've heard about whistleblowers for years, and I can honestly, ashamedly say that I never got involved with it. It's denial. You don't want to hear that pain. I have a friend whose son was a whistleblower, and he lost his health, and he won his case. And I know several whistleblowers. They're not taken seriously. When are we going to give them credibility? When are we going to listen to an employee that speaks up about his safety and others' safety? When are we going to stop labeling them as a whistleblower? that's what the problem is. We're labeled when you speak up about what's wrong with the workplace.